Hello and welcome back guys to another video, and today it's actually time for another benchmark video. And yes, I have finally upgraded my GPU from the 1050 Ti to the RX 5700 XT, and guys, I can just tell you that I'm so hyped. This is so awesome, this GPU. So at first let's just get to the system specs. As you can see, of course I'm using the Gigabyte RX 5700 XT Gaming OC. Then the CPU is a Ryzen 5 3600. Then I got 16 gigabytes of Corsair Vengeance RGB RAM, which I overclocked to 3600 MHz CL18. The mainboard is the MSI B450 Tomahawk. Then just besides the system drive is a 500 GB NVMe SSD, and then there are another 4 TB hard drives as main storage. As I already said, I call this the ultimate 1080p gaming PC. But you might question yourself why I chose the RX 5700 XT. Many people would use a GTX 1660 Super or a RX 5600 XT for 1080p gaming, except me. In my case, it depends on different aspects. For an example, I play on a 144Hz monitor and I want to play everything on max settings. And I also want to keep the GPU for a minimum of 3 years. All the results led me to this graphics card. And now let's just jump straight to the benchmarks to see what it can do. The first test is going to Jedi Fallen Order, and as you might have already heard, it's well optimized. In this scenario I'm getting 130 FPS on the max settings. And yes, it's well playable, and I also hope that the next generation games will be same optimized. In Battlefield 5, I chose the highest preset available and it runs better smoothly. For 1080p, I recommend turning future frame rendering on for getting more FPS. But if for 4K, I wouldn't recommend it because it would cause a too high latency. And now the new Star Wars Battlefront 2. I have already played the OG Star Wars Battlefront 2 from 2005, but now since 2019 the newer one is also pretty good, and it's also well optimized. As you can see, I get on highest settings possible, over 120 FPS outside and inside, maybe even 160 FPS on average. So I don't have any problems with this game. It runs smoothly, and yes, it's a pretty nice game now. Let's just jump to Forza Horizon 4. And yes, I love Forza Horizon. I love how they made it with this open world racing games and realistic and graphics. But let's just talk about this benchmark. As you can see, I'm using the Ultra preset, and yes, it's not a problem for my GPU or just for the whole system, because as you can see, we get 144 FPS, and that's all what I want to have. Also, in a normal Forza Horizon 4 benchmark, it gets 160 FPS on average, and this is pretty impressive. Let's come back to the older titles. In GTA 5 I pushed the settings to the limit, and a minimum of 75 FPS is pretty impressive. Outside of the city I could get 120 FPS. You can also lower the settings a little bit, which might not affect the visual quality, and the frame rate will increase to 100 FPS on average. In Rainbow Six Siege I picked the Ultra preset again, just to test it out. But if you wanna play this game for competitive reasons, I would recommend playing on special low settings. The lower the graphics, the more FPS you get. If you cap the frame rate, you get a lower latency. Like in Battlefield 5, I also picked the highest settings in Battlefield 1 again, and I get a little bit more FPS than in the newer title. I also picked a full 64 player game just to show the worst case scenario. I also have to add that I did the same at Battlefield 5 but forgot to mention before. In Assassin's Creed Origins, the benchmark went totally wrong, because I'm using an old version of this game, which still has the GPU usage issue. As you can see on the top left corner, the GPU never reaches its full usage, and this makes the benchmark invalid. If you have the new version of this game, you should be fine and get 75 FPS on average. In Overwatch, I picked Ultra preset and get a minimum of 140 FPS and an average of 200 FPS. I know it's kinda useless, but it's just for the test. I myself play on medium just to have low latencies and to save power while the frame rate is kept on 144 FPS. This was the final game of this benchmark, and now I will just show you some 3D Mark benchmark results. The final thing I did was a 3D Mark Firestrike and Timespy. In Firestrike I get 21,976 overall points, 27,607 graphics points and 19,000 physics points. In Timespy I got 9,067 overall points, 9,600 graphics points and 7,030 CPU points. I also just wanted to mention that I didn't overclock the GPU the whole time and I left it on default. If you like this video, leave a like. If you have questions, tell me in the comments. And if you wanna see more, just follow me. See you guys soon and bye.